All right, welcome to Beccaro and Hook's Enlightened Dissent. I am Steve Hook. There's my friend Thomas Beccaro. Of course, we invite you to follow us at Beccaro and Hook, both on Rumble and of course YouTube there, and coming soon to a Facebook page near you, I assume. But it's great to have you with us. We've got a lot to talk about. Tom, I know, the scuttlebutt for the last few days now, has been this debate. I watched the debate. I'm telling you, man, if I had a brick, I wouldn't have a TV right now. That was the most embarrassing thing. Now we're gonna have a great guest today, Dr. B. Bridget Melson is going to join us, and we're going to talk with her about the psychology of the media and its effect on society. And of course, watching that debate was a case study in it. What did you think about it, Tom? Just right out of the gate.
Well, it always frustrates me watching politicians debate. As you know, I debated her twice and actually won the post-debate poll with her in California. The only time I ever think about running for office is when I watch a debate and want to be the one on the stage dealing with it. It's a study in how ludicrous and hypocritical Kamala Harris is. I mean, she spent much of the debate being very chippy and cynical and calling Trump names or classifying him in a very negative light, and then said at the end, "Oh, we got to stop doing this sort of thing." And somehow they get away with that. And now we're in this position where I don't think we're gonna have another debate. I don't think. Look, at the end of the day, the knock going in for this was that she wouldn't tell us what her plans are, and she doesn't answer questions. And At the end of the day, she didn't tell us her plans, and she didn't answer any questions. Now, the media is going to say she was great because she was more forceful than Biden, but does that move the needle with independents and the undecideds? And that's what we're going to have to see.
I got to tell you, I agree with everything you just said there. And I would only add that it wasn't just that she didn't answer the questions. She wasn't pressed on any of them. They came out and a report came out, I think in the New York Post printed it, that every fact check that David Muir and Lindsay Davis did on Trump, as it turns out, every one of them, they got wrong. Every single one. And on the flip side of that coin, they never fact checked Kamala Harris once, not once. So I thought it was staggering. I think those people that she needed to speak to, I think she flew right over their heads. I think they were like, okay, well, there's style over substance may win as far as the View panelists go, and ABC, CBS, NBC, and the rest. But I don't know that the independents were fooled by it. Trump, on the other hand, came out and said, "Hey, man, it was the best debate performance of my life." That's debatable. I don't think it was. I think that he took the bait far too many times, which of course was her, her strategy going in. But then Trump did get a little bit more substantive in his answers. Tom, you're out in Cali. Former President Trump was out in California yesterday at his golf course, and I want you to hear what he had to say about some of the things that went unsaid yesterday. We're talking about, well, let me see, child trafficking that was not touched on, defunding the police. Kamala Harris is passed with that. Why don't we just listen to this cut and then we'll get your take on it.
As Attorney General, she defined child sex trafficking, assault with a deadly weapon, and rape of an unconscious person as nonviolent crimes. She put them in a new category as nonviolent. Now, as vice president, she's facilitated the largest wave of sex trafficking and human trafficking in history, the history of our country by far. And in case you don't want to write about it, which you should, because there can be no bigger scandal than this, we have, under this administration, 325,000 migrant children are missing. 325,000. In other words, take your biggest stadium in California and you could fill it up 5 or 6 times. Those are all missing children. Many of them are dead. Many of them are sex slaves and slaves of different nature. But her destruction of the law and order in California did not end there. In 2020, Kamala Harris proudly endorsed defund the police. We're going to defund the police. Anybody that was even in favor of defunding the police for 1 month, let alone her entire career, should never be president of the United States. She supported a plan to cut the LA Police Department by at least $150 million and ideally more. This is when your crime in LA was reaching very significant heights. Today, it's at the highest level it's ever been.
Yeah. So there you go. And he wasn't wrong on that. And of course, that wasn't the media didn't fact check any of that. The media didn't fact check the fact. And of course, the irony here, Tom, is that 2 days after the debate, a report is released, a government report, a victims report, comes out and says, guess what? Violent crime across the board is up 37%. David Muir didn't touch on that. 325,000 missing migrant kids. What do you think?
Well, and they also admitted after the fact that they fact-checked Trump because the moderator, felt that what happened in the Biden debate, Trump got away with too much. So they purposefully tilted it. And I think the tally was 5, quote, fact checks of Trump and 0 for Harris, who lied multiple times, claiming, the 2025 was Trump's. And by the way, that campaign admitted they know it's not, but it's working among voters. So they're gonna keep doing it. Look, the reality is Americans don't know how radical that Kamala is. They have an inkling, but even Trump's pollster showed that some 70% of people don't know most of her views. And if they get those views in front of people, that will decide the election. You got to ask yourself why they aren't running those commercials just listing her views at this stage. Why aren't they running the flip-flop commercials at this stage? The polling, post-debate polling, one of them, and they sample too many Democrats, but this is, and we're going to talk about the psychology of the media with my good friend, Dr. B, in the next segment. But the reality is that the PR on the left is touting polls showing, that she did well. What did she do well? She was an attack dog, and they don't care about the truth. They are so obsessed with victory, even though by all counts, she doesn't have the experience for this job. They wanted to throw her out 4 months ago, saying she needs to leave the ticket. And now victory at all costs mean they're going to forgive her for this type of thing. What bothers me, though, at the end of the day, you started talking about Kamala, and then you went to Trump. Debates are about the 3 things you have to do in a debate. There's only 3. You have to answer the questions. Period, full stop. Did you go to the store that day? Well, I'm a middle-class person. No, did you go to the store? People want to hear you actually. I get it. We're in the heat of the moment. You don't always answer, but you got to answer the questions. Number 2, you got to propose solutions. People want elections about the future. People want to know how you're going to fix things. And given how many things are broken, that should be easy in this context. And the third thing, which arguably is the most important thing of all, is to come off liked. People like to like who they're voting for. And Kamala Harris came off very chippy. And going forward, if there's another debate, I hope, because look, JFK said that domestic politics can defeat us, foreign policy can kill us. We cannot afford her as the commander-in-chief because we cannot afford 4 more years of dangerous, weak foreign policy, even though she claimed that Trump was weak. Plus that stat that's out there, Steve, that says that 12 of the last 16 years have been Democrats in the White House. Do you really want to make that 16 for 20?
Yeah.
And the results that would come from that? So I hope if there's another debate, they'll concentrate on being liked, concentrate on answering the questions. Doesn't have to be long answers. The shorter, the better, and propose solutions.
No, we'll see. I know that Trump said initially, he said, nope, we're not doing it anymore. It's done. Yesterday, he seemed to waffle a little bit on that. We'll see if we get another debate. I just think that if we get another debate, maybe it was all strategy on Trump's part to say no, hoping that he'll get fairer moderators. Although in this day and age, I don't know that that's possible because the other side is going to say, well, we're not doing it on Fox. So they'll play that card. But I can't wait to hear what Dr. B has to say about all this because I'm sure it's pretty enlightening. We all know what we saw, and it was, to my mind, rather pathetic. And just to give you a little anecdotal, Tom, my wife, who is not nearly as into politics as I am, though she does pay somewhat of attention to it. I mean, how can you not? She goes to the store too. She came out and said, I've never seen, I mean, she was stunned at the moderators. She couldn't believe it. She goes, I used to like David Muir, not anymore. And it's not even because she's a Trumper. She just saw the blatant partisanship and bias that was being put on display in front of the entire nation. I thought that she didn't. I thought Kamala didn't answer any questions. And then, by the way, real quick, I know we got to wrap this segment up, but real quick, she came out and did a interview with a local reporter in Philly. Really the first one she's done since that disastrous one she did about a month or so ago. And she was asked the same question she was asked at the debate about, middle-class people are hurting. What are you going to do? And she said, I come from middle-class background where people care about their lawns. I mean, help me make that make sense, because I don't get what that has to do with the question, but I know that the media, even the local guy, didn't press her. He just let her ramble and then just went to something else.
Look, at the end of the day, she doesn't have a depth of knowledge, and she's just going to say what emotes. Speaking of which, our next guest, Dr. B, longtime friend of mine with a doctorate in psychology, is going to help us understand some of this in a segment we call the psychology of the media. So thanks so much for tuning in again, Del Beccaro and Hook on Rumble and on YouTube, and we'll post this on Facebook. But and please subscribe to those channels, and we'll be right back with the next segment. Thanks so much. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Tom Del Beccaro. That's Steve Hook, and I'm excited to have this particular guest, given what's going on in the American media. I'm going to call this section the psychology of the media, and we're joined today by Dr. Bridget Melson. Dr. B is a doctorate in psychology and has a postdoctorate certificate in medical neuroscience from Duke University. I had to read that so I get it right. She has an expertise at working with at-risk teens, including mass shooters, which I've talked to her about over the years, incredibly interesting. But she also has done extensive research on how mass media and social media affects public perception and the brain. Dr. Melson, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Lots to talk about.
Yes, there's too much to talk about. So let's just dive right into it. Perhaps at an accelerating pace, it seems to even the average American that the American media, mostly on the left, is an echo chamber one person says something, and then it seems that they all fall in line. Recently, of course, you saw when the Democrats' VP candidate used the word weird, it was instantaneously across all of their, not only social media, but their mainstream, meaning their platforms. So I'd like to talk to you about that today. Where do you see the state of American media with regard to that? And how is it, very importantly, how do you see that affecting Americans today?
I talk about this every single week, and I try to tell as many people as I can how dangerous the media is right now on the mind. We've got social media is a part of it. Mass media includes all of that. And, I study the effects of social media on the minds of teenagers, because you look at TikTok and Insta and all of these, and what we're seeing is adults, and it affects our brain as adults. We're seeing it also in kids. So it's not just us. So parents, wake up. You really need to limit your children, because it's affecting them developmentally, which is in a very negative way. And some of it's irreparable. So I think the question is, why do we believe everything we hear? Like, what is going on? Why are these people being turned over so easily? You and I, everybody on here, we're just like, what? I feel like we're walking around like zombies, and why are people believing this? The human mind, we've got bias that we just are around our environment, how we're born, how we are biologically. And the media has figured that out. And it doesn't take a lot of brain power to figure out how to do this. It's been done before, but it's happening. Some of the things they do, their techniques, for instance, just listen. You guys will understand what's going on. They stack the experts, which means they say, oh, we've got this expert. Even Fox News, they all do it. Everybody does it. And there's still a bias you've got to understand within those media personalities.
So when you say stack the expert, what does that mean? Just
Yeah.
expert after expert saying the same thing?
Yeah, in a different way. Yes, saying the same thing in a different way. And they come across with maybe one compliment for each candidate, or whomever they is on stage that they're wanting to interview, and then underneath they start layering it. And that's what my next point is they add just a little poison. And you think about, don't mean to be morbid, but you think about these crime stories where people, just a little arsenic, so it's untraceable. The media does that. The media psychologically does that and implants a little bit of poison, a little bit of falsehood, lies, just enough to where it's really easy to manipulate the mind. Just gets the mass viewers to put a check in their morality, a check in what they've known all their lives, just a little bit of a hint that something's not right, and maybe I need to go listen to that. And they do this on purpose. And then the next episode, the next media event, the next debate, they put a little bit more poison, a little different. Maybe it's not arsenic, maybe it's fentanyl, and so that's what they do. So they stack the experts, and they got that going. We see it all the time. They add just a little bit of poison, a little bit of lies, a little bit of untruths, as we've seen. What I like to do is go research, for instance, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris from the beginning, and look through everything they said years ago, and then look to now, and you can see the poison, just little by little by little, to now full on. If you gave all of that to somebody, it would kill them. And that's what we're doing. We're killing America with it. But it's, to the normal human eye and ears, we don't know what's happening to us. It's a big psychological game. The other huge thing is I love this statement too, make the devil look like God and God look like the devil. Again, a little bit of poison, a little bit of their immorality, their moral standards, which it's not even, they call it morality, but it's not. But just a little bit of that depravity and that offness. I always tell my kids, because we're Christians, but I always tell my kids that the enemy, evil, just has to get us off 1 degree. He doesn't have to switch us around 180, just 1 degree at a time. And that is exactly what the media is doing to us. It's a huge psychological game. Avoid abstract ideas, which they do, and appeal to emotions. We see that. Look at this poor person. Look at this. Oh, if they wouldn't have crossed the border, they would have no life and they would be killed, right? And they ignore everything else that's going on and how we are letting people over the border, for instance, legally. There's still, it's not like we're just closed up. And so they just mess around with your head just a little bit. Constantly repeat just a few ideas. They do this all the time. Again, stacking, little poison, repeating. The psychology of this all, when Walter Cronkite, was the man in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the media reported the news way more than they do now. Right now, it's just a big old personality op-ed show. And it's just the emotions. People reacted emotionally for sure, but now it's all they want to do. They add all of their own salt, all of their own poison. I hate keep saying that. And then they criticize. And I just studying this all, I miss it so much, how it used to be. So the next thing they do is they pick out a special enemy for special vilification, which has become, who, Donald Trump. A good friend who's in media, he was responsible for doing picture placement in all of the, it was a college newspaper, but they would do, worldwide events and excuse me, issues. But his bias, he would pick one of the ugliest pictures he could, right? I know, I'm sure you guys have heard all of this, to put, and then he said, it's interesting because he covered Trump years ago and he picked a circus clown because the circus was coming to town. This is no joke. And he put him next to that circus advertisement. So just things like that. And I know it sounds so simple, but this is what they do. So another thing that's very concerning to me, there's something called dark psychology. And I know it sounds like it's something it's going to be in a horror film, but it's a triad of three things. Machiavellianism, and it has nothing to do with him. It's just what this psychologist called narcissism, and then psychopathology, I guess you would call it. So I talk about how social media is creating a sociopathic brain in our kids, meaning they're desensitized, right? They can sit there and watch horrible things. They can watch murders and car accidents. And I mean, it's horrible what's available. So what the dark triad is, the media is using it, dark psychology, and they're using all three things they're using their manipulation to create that in people. Narcissism, a desensitization, and then just cognitive dissonance. They want you to be, I know it's a big word. So cognitive dissonance, a part of that dark psychology, just means they want you to second guess every single thing you do in life. And so those are the three things we're seeing that they're using the tactics. That is frightening, because dark psychology is what mass shooters are into. And this is just interesting that I am involved working with mass shooters. I've met with them in prison and heard their stories. And then I'm looking and researching all of this, what the media is doing, what their intent is, the amount of lies, the amount of pieces of poison, and it all adds up to this triad of dark psychology.
Wow.
So this is no joke.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Dr. B. First of all, welcome to Beccaro and Hook. It's wonderful to meet you and to see you.
Thank you.
We talk about the media. The old adage in the media used to be, if it bleeds, it leads. And everybody understood that. That was basically just, hey, put something on the front pages or on the first block of the news segment and blast it if it involves death, destruction, anything like that. And you're going to garner more eyes, more ears, and people are going to tune in. This is something well beyond that, though. This is putting the thumb on the scale. And it's not just the media. We're talking about the media, and obviously media manipulation is very real. We see that. We certainly saw that at the debate. But it's also Hollywood. It's also, to a larger extent, professional athletes. It seems like every social lever right now is in the firm grasp of a progressive, I'll say it, Marxist mindset, which is, no matter what it is, we're pushing it in one direction. And then, of course, that leads to confirmation bias, that these people that buy into this stuff say, yeah, see, I saw it on CNN, ABC, Taylor Swift said it. and so did LeBron James. So therefore, it has to be true. Um, have you ever seen it like this before? Ever? I mean, prior to Donald Trump, or is this just some new fascination with destroying this guy that we're just all now witnessing together?
This is definitely escalated. Both as, you know, a God-fearing woman and a psychologist, my mind continues to be blown, right? I'm on other, you know, some radio shows every week, and we talk about these things. And the stories and the research that I'm finding, the fact that the liberal psychological agencies are now researching and writing about this. That I'm again mind blown that they're concerned about the output and our input. You know what we're seeing, the hypocrisy, the projection. Those are the two things primarily I see. Projection meaning projecting onto other people what you're feeling. So we definitely see that when there are these moderators, commentators interviewing the liberal audience, right? They go on these campuses and they're screaming and raging, and people are like, Dr. B, like, how are they in school? How are they roaming around? How are they not locked up? And they are projecting their evil, lack of a moral code, lack of self-control, and that is frightening. And then the hypocrisy, you know, I talk about this. There's a thing called political hypocrisy. It has become a word. It's a psychological phrase that we use. Political hypocrisy. I love that Michael Gerson, what he says about it is the conscious use of a mask to fool the public and gain political benefit. And that is, I mean, it's, yep, we call this out. It's out there to be looked at and to be researched if people would just do their own research. It's interesting, you know, people ask me again all the time, Dr. B, you know, well, what's hypocritical? What are the lies? Because I had a huge debate party. They're sitting there looking at Kamala Harris, keep it together. And I'm like, are you close your eyes and just listen to her, first of all. And then let me send you guys some research and see. And everything is just so opposite. So it's completely hypocritical.
Yeah, you watched that, and she said we need to stop calling people's names. Yet the whole debate,
Yeah,
or throughout the debate, she was calling people's name. You know, in my book, The Lessons of the American Civilization, I make a couple of points, and I'd like you to give your thoughts on this. I said throughout all of history, the media has been more to the left or progressive than the average person's lives. Even so, take a William Shakespeare or a Chaucer. What is in those books or in those plays is far more racy than the average person's life. That has always been true in history. The city it has more temptations than the countryside. So as we migrate from the farm to the city, this accelerates. And now with technology, what happens in Florida, or in this case, as he points out, in Hollywood, is instantaneously in your child's hands. And this acceleration process, you know, civilizations become richer faster now. After World War II, Japan's rise to wealth was virtually overnight by historical standards. But this eroding of traditions and customs, which are the guardrail of a civilization, accelerates as well. So and then you see it on TV, and a Kamala Harris, you know, her giving a speech, this hypocrisy, saying Donald Trump wants to jail his opponents, and then 4 days later they re-indict him for that very same thing. My question to you is, why do people fall for projection so easily? And also, and then follow up with that, it's everywhere around us. So what, especially for children, what do you recommend for parents?
Yeah, so why people fall for this, you know, basically the lies of the media and this projection and hypocrisy, doubled standards, right? It's everywhere. Self-interest, right? We have bias, we have self-interest. There's an interesting study real quick that I think 3 different colleges did. I read it was 2 or 3, but they got hundreds of people together and they asked them politically, do you want to hear truths about this candidate or lies about this candidate? And then do you want to hear? And then they picked up some moral issues and said, do you want to hear both sides of this moral issue or just the one that you favor? I think it was LGBT transgender. 9 out of 10 people just wanted to do research and answer questions on their view of it. They didn't even, and they were promised $100 more even to be given the other side of it. And they still took the $10 versus the $100 to hear their side. They would not listen to the other side even for an extra $90, per
Wow.
question. And that just shows you what we're up against. Fear, low self-esteem, definitely part of it. Fear of missing out, right? If people speak out on social media, at work, they're going to get slaughtered. They're going to get verbally abused. They're going to get fired. There's just a huge fear the mass media has created. Social desirability, right? Well, they painted Kamala up nice and she's, ethnic, the things that people say, it's like, oh, she's socially desirable. And this is what I hear. This is what the research says these people are saying. And then the path of least resistance. Number one, people do not want to go against the flow. They just don't. And we are seeing just a huge issue with all of this. That's the psychology of it. With kids, the problem is, and I have a TikTok account. I hate it. But I go on just to see I've got to know what this generation is looking at. And the ads, the liberal Democratic ads and the lies that come through and the way they're reaching them, mind blown. It used to be 13 times that you hear or see something that your mind has changed. And now, because of how aggressive it is and how much our brains have changed physically and physiologically, our minds have changed. We have larger gray matter and less white matter. You don't want that. We need the white matter. So this is physiologically changing our minds, our brains, and also kids. But because of it, it's just 2 to 3 times that we hear it, that it becomes a belief. So
Yeah,
it went from
Dr. B,
yeah.
as I'm listening to you talk about this, I keep coming back to confirmation bias because I know that that's what's happening here, and I see it all the time. I see it with people that that will believe a story that is flatly and blatantly wrong or removed, all context removed. But not only that, it's not just against Donald Trump. It's against
Correct.
anyone that might tell a different side of the story. We see this with Fox News. Oh, you watch faux news. Ha ha ha. We see this with the New York Post. So in other words, any outlet that is giving the other side of the story is likewise demonized by the media and by Hollywood and by the
Right.
movers and shakers in the cocktail parties inside the Beltway. It's pretty staggering. And what shocks me is how gullible we have become. I mean, just I've always kind of thought that I was a critical thinker, but I'm beginning to think that nobody else is.
Have you ever have you ever second guessed? I mean, for a second, have you ever second guessed things that you hear? It's partly because the physiological issues in the mind. I mean, because we are so exposed to social media. Gen X, boomers, we have it a little bit better, but millennials, they don't have a chance unless you just have to get a moral code and stick to it and not be wishy-washy. I don't know. It sounds super not psychological. But parents have got to do their job and limit what they watch. We've got to turn off our notifications. We are psychologically addicted. I don't know if you know when you hear a ding or if you see a notification pop up on your phone, a little bit of dopamine it's expressed out of your brain, and you get kind of a rush. And that is an addiction, and we're all addicted somehow, good or bad, but kids can't handle that. Teens are going to have a real issue, and that's going to, open them and expose them to other addictions. So it's a real issue. So yeah. So what do? We've got to limit ourselves. We need to turn off our notifications. These tactics that they're using, it's pure propaganda at this point. It's not the news whatsoever. The way they're getting in, the way they're infiltrating, they make it seem beautiful and nice, and we care about you. And declassifying certain things. For instance, it's interesting that both Biden, had all those declassified files. We forgive him. That is a part of the media is finding out about that stuff and reading about it. Propaganda is carefully timed, all of the things that they put out there. Material from the enemy propaganda is utilized. Just everything we're seeing right now is frightening, and it's after the research I've done, it's a complete a page out of a playbook of Joseph Goebbels, which was the propaganda minister to Nazi Germany's Hitler, and that's why I think it's so frightening. It is absolutely frightening. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, yeah, what is new is actually very old. Dictators and others throughout history have recognized this type of thing, the vulnerability of people, especially during dangerous or times where there's perceived risk. People's desire to actually want to believe in in their leaders and things of that nature. We got to wrap it up here. Dr. B, I really appreciate you being on. Where can people follow you?
Bridget Melson on Facebook and drbradio.com.
drbradio.com, people. That's it. Dr. B, thanks so much for all your work. People, you really should listen to her. Every time there is a mass shooting, I give her a ring just to get her understanding of this, which is contemplated versus the media impact that they're trying to peddle at any given moment. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Tom Del Beccaro, that's Steve Hook, and this is the 4th episode of Del Beccaro and Hook. And I want to thank my guest, Dr. Melson, for that sort of eye-opening, or not sort of at all, eye-opening look at the psychology of the media and really how they, in tearing it away, at least from my perspective, and I wrote about this in my book, The Lessons of the American Civilization, they tear away the fabric of society. One thing I talk about in the book, Steve, is the role of traditions and customs in maintaining a civilization. No civilization has existed or maintained itself without a moral code. No moral code has survived in the absence of a affirmative and supportive religious institutions and education institutions. And the way this sort of goes is customs, traditions, and those supportive institutions are the guardrails on a mountain road for a civilization. If you remove those guardrails, well, you get the image. And in America today, and this is not new to history, my book, The Lessons of the American Civilization, is to get you to understand how civilizations rise and fall with great regularity. And you say history repeats itself. Well, we're not the first to go down this mountain road, but we need to understand it and spot it when we see it. And we're seeing this today, where these institutions are being attacked, whether it's our religious institutions, our moral code is being challenged at virtually every turn. The role of technology has sped this process up. Just take the issue of LGBTQ plus and the like, which came out of nowhere as an issue just a few years ago, and then suddenly it's pervasive. When we grew up, issues didn't race that fast because they didn't get around the country that fast. But today, whatever occurs in Florida happens in your child's hand. And we as Americans, I get asked all the time, what's to do about this? And the reality is, for parents, you have to be involved in your children's life. You have to educate them at home as much as in the school. You have to give them those values, and you need to talk to them about what they're hearing in school. That's certainly what I did with my daughter.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're absolutely right. I love your analogy about the mountain road, by the way. And it would be one thing if these guardrails were just removed from the mountain road, um because societal changes. So all of a sudden we're going to throw out what was old and what's and now we're going to embrace what's new. Um but the reality of today's world seems to be the guardrails are removed specifically to see that car plunge over the mountain road. If you want to destroy a country, you remove those guardrails. If you want to change the civil society, you remove those guardrails. And not only do you remove the guardrails, but then, to your point, to the LGBTQ plus community, then you start foisting upon the civil society things that have never been considered normative, I guess, and say, no, this is absolutely normal. And if you don't think it's normal, you're the problem, and you need to be pilloried, and you need to be dragged through the mud, and you need to be canceled. I mean, to borrow a line from Aldous Huxley, man, it's a brave new world. And it's very, very scary when you realize it's being done intentionally for malevolent purposes. And I think, at least I'm hopeful, that people are starting to wake up to that.
So you mentioned normative. Remember that both Obama and Biden first campaigned against gay marriage. And then within a couple of years, they changed on the issue. And then this cancellation process, which you described for anyone who disagreed, happened in a matter of 2 or 3 years. So this isn't something you're imagining, folks. This is a specific tactic. They said those things to get elected and then quickly moved on. What did Bernie Sanders say this just I don't know, within a week ago, I think, about Kamala Harris? So she's just changing her views so that she can get elected.
Pragmatic.
Yes.
Yeah, she's pragmatic.
Right? Yeah, but no one should believe that. I mean, look, among people, I know Kamala more than most. And there was a statement, a British politician made this statement to his wife about someone else, where he said the fellow wasn't very bright, and he was like a feather pillow. He bared the impression of the last person to sit on him. And while Kamala Harris was under the tutelage of Willie Brown, who was on the left and is on the left, Willie Brown was practical, and she didn't do that bad. But with regard to policies, she had some good, some bad. For those who are right of center, they didn't like her views, but they weren't over the top radical back then. But the farther she's gotten away from him, and the more you rise in current Democrat politics, the more left you have to become. She is listening to those on the left. The problem is for America is, and I said this earlier about that domestic politics can defeat us, but foreign policy can kill us, and that's JFK. The people in charge of our foreign policy today are awful. We talked about this last episode with Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and she has no experience. And worse than that, look, we elect governors who don't technically have experience in foreign policy. The problem is that she has such a lack of depth of knowledge, understanding of history, that she's not capable of making those decisions. So she is going to be led around in these decisions by people we already know are doing a horrible job and not taking responsibility, and then somehow they're blaming Trump for this. I mean, no better example of this is blaming Trump for the Afghan pullout. They say, well, he did a terrible deal. So then why did you go through with it? If you thought it was a bad deal, why didn't you renegotiate? Why did you have to rush to exit? Now, we know the truth has come out since that statement that Biden wanted out no matter what. And that's what caused this. But we cannot afford to have someone like Kamala Harris with such a lack of depth of knowledge who did what you just described, which is ramble on about lawns.
Well, yeah, she's a, one thing I know that what I learned coming out of the debate was that Kamala Harris lived in a middle class lifestyle. That's what I learned. So, and I don't even know that I believe that. It is pretty staggering.
She did not live in. She had both parents were doing well, and she led a better than average life. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I agree with you. I just think I just really do think it's, let me just say this real quick. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'll just say this. After that debate, a debate that was all about style over substance from the Kamala Harris camp. After that debate, I turned to my wife and my daughter. The three of us watched it together. My oldest daughter watched it at her home. So we all kind of discussed it afterwards, after the fact. And the one thing that I came away with was there's going to be a backlash. They may be touting how great Kamala did in this debate because she at least was cognitively there, even though she didn't answer any of the questions. But the debate was so skewed and so obviously skewed that unless you were really, really, really in the Trump hate camp, you noticed it, and it was impossible not to notice. So I'm wondering if the backlash will continue and where we go from here. But fingers crossed that people figured that out. I think a lot of them
and
did.
Also, as I mentioned earlier, these things don't happen in a vacuum. The knock on her is that she doesn't answer questions, and you don't know where she stands on the issues. And at the end of that debate, they talked to some independents, and they said, we still don't know. And so on the issue of, it would be one thing if Trump didn't answer a question on a policy when you've already known what he's done on that same policy. You don't have that with Kamala. And so this is still up in the air. And people ask me, well, as bad as she is, why is this still up in the air? And the answer is over my shoulder. We live in such a divided era that those on the left are going to vote no matter what. The same is true on the right. So we're in this period where we're going to have these close elections. So folks, thanks so much for tuning in to The Odd Couple. I mean, me and Steve on Del Beccaro and Hook. He's the only guy on earth who can make me jealous of of how much hair I have. I can look at Steve Hook. Follow us on Rumble. Follow us on YouTube. We'll post this. Please help us repost it by subscribing and sharing. That's right. As well, sharing is caring. Who said that? Wasn't me. But anyway, folks, thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you again next week.